Hello and welcome. I'm Carl Pauls, and this is the Ecomodernist channel live. I'm here with Gabe Ignetti, Chris Bergen, and our special guest. Andy Dawson graduated in nuclear engineering in 1982 from the University of Manchester, where he later received a master's in science. Andy worked in design and construction of the AGR stations Heysham 2 and Torness, with excursions into Fast Reactors and the Sizewell PWR. He then worked in Management Consultancy and IT, though always in and around the energy sector. Prominent nuclear power supporters Mark Lynas and George Monbeit have said that the Hinkley C nuclear plant under construction in Britain should be scrapped. So Andy is going to speak to us from England about whether Hinkley Point is a boon or a boondoggle. Welcome to the program, Andy.
Right. I think the boondoggle phrase came from Lynas, didn't it, about Hinkley C? The first thing I'd say is those comments from George and Mark do go back quite a long way, I think 2015. So having said that, I'm not sure the performance of the Hinkley construction really is likely to have warmed anyone or weaned anyone away from those views. Just as a very quick starting point, I can't say I know either of those guys, although I have corresponded with them quite a lot and been on various social media channels debating. They come at this from very different viewpoints. Mark's view on that, from everything I gather, was that he regarded PWRs as an obsolete technology. George's is rather different. George's politics are interesting. Although he's pro-nuclear, he's very much of the sort of dark green, back to nature strand of the green movement. His biggest interest is actually rewilding, something which most ecomodernists would be very supportive of. But he's very strongly anti-capitalist. And also, strangely enough, very strongly against large state-run entities. So George's support has always looked a little strange in the sense that it's not at all clear how he'd want to see a major project like the construction of a nuclear power plant delivered. So that makes, for a slight question mark against it. I don't wish to be in any way disparage either of these guys. They're both very committed, very hardworking, but they come at this from very different perspectives. Mark, as I understand it, like I say, regarded PWRs as an obsolete technology and would have preferred to see the money go straight to a fast reactor. And again, although I respect Mark greatly, I don't think he's actually particularly au fait with the development process of sort of pretty heavyweight technologies. Back in my graduate traineeship, I did about 3 months working on the UK's commercial fast reactor design. And having come from a relatively conventional design like an AGR, it was slightly scary. My particular job was modelling thermal stressing on boiler supports, which sounds like an awfully mundane job. It isn't. When you've got a 2.5 gigawatt heat source connected to a structure with liquid sodium coolant moving heat between the two, to simply say, oh, well, let's develop a fast design, really doesn't quite cut it. I will admit, overall, being a rather conservative in favour of in terms of the technologies I tend to favour. AGRs were, inadequately developed before we committed to them. And by God, it caused us problems. By contrast, we bought an absolutely conventional, off-the-shelf, four-loop, 1200 meg PWR for Sizewell, and it went in on time and budget, despite the fact we did our usual thing and mess about with design changes. So, there's an awful lot to be said for known quantities.
I definitely feel that. So what is it about the public expenditure to bring about this clean energy source that is really bothering those two gentlemen?
Well, like I say, their comments, as far as I'm aware, go back to 2015. They're not recent. However, there is a big issue with the price of Hinkley and the time it's taking to develop Hinkley. That, in all honesty, I think comes down to something very simple. It's a hideously overcomplicated design. And again, this goes back a little bit to the history of power and nuclear power in Europe. I mean, the design was basically a merger, an extrapolation of the French N4 1200 megawatt with aspects of the German Convoy standardized design. But they decided that basically they were going to preempt all possible regulatory and safety implications by going for massive redundancy. So not only is it a 4-loop rather than a 3-loop design, and yeah, there are successful 4-loop designs out there, there's an entire extra layer of redundant safety equipment on the thing. And frankly, I think it's pushing at the level of what is buildable in a controlled program. To give an illustration, I guess a few of you guys know Jarro Franta, the Canadian chap who comments regularly. Jarro's done a beautiful exercise of late where he takes a superimposed picture of a complete BWR X300 unit and superimposes it over plant layouts for EPR, the Hinkley design. And I think he's done it for one other, and I'm not entirely sure what it was. The thing you immediately strikes you about the EPR comparison is basically you can slot a BWR X300 into the same space as any one of the 4 steam generators, and then you've got all the ancillary kit, the reactor vessel itself, the pipe and so on, sitting outside of those. I simply think the thing is too big and too complex.
Yeah, I've seen you around for a very long time, Andy, in different threads.
Do I owe you any apologies?
Do they generally have their initial idea of nuclear stuck in their mind, or do they evolve?
George Monbeit has certainly evolved. I mean, I remember him, he's a long-time writer for the Guardian newspaper over here. And I remember George's conversion in the late 20s,
the late
40s. Yeah, sort of road to Damascus. Mark, I think, was a little different. Mark sort of came to it really through a process of rationality, and the fact that Mark came to the conclusion that climate change was such an overwhelming risk that anything that would move us beyond that would be valuable. And to be honest, then I think his conversion to the nuclear cause was very, very much tied up with his discovery of ecomodernism, the belief of the high energy, high population density society with minimal impact outside of restricted urban areas. So I think Mark came to it through that.
I want to sort of change the topic a little bit, I guess.
Please.
What is it about renewables that is different from this investment in the large Hinkley Point station, the jobs, and the lack of pollution that goes with it? Is renewables a suitable slot-in replacement for that?
As you've gathered from the intro, my engineering training goes back to the late 70s and the 80s. Some people cheerfully tell me I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but my issues with renewables come down to a single issue, and that's, well, a single primary issue, and that's intermittency. To give you an example, we've done very well at building out wind in the UK. Solar in the UK is verging on the insane, but that's a separate discussion. How many of you, when I use the words United Kingdom or England or whatever, immediately are thinking of blue skies with lots of sun? Yeah?
About as
And
much as Seattle.
well, about as much as Seattle. Actually, very, very similar climates. Yes. Our capacity factor for solar, averaged over the year, is about 11%.
Mm-hmm.
So stick a 3 kilowatt array on your roof, which is our standard. You'll get about 300 watts on average over the year. But what nobody mentions to you is that actually you get most of that in summer, and by winter your capacity factor is down around 2 to 2.5%. So in winter, your 3.5 kilowatt array on the roof will be averaging something like 50 or 60 watts. Let's not be ungenerous. So, frankly, solar in the UK is insanity. Doesn't make power when we need it, and when it does make power, it makes the economics of the power sources we need from when solar won't run much worse. It's barking mad. Great, wind can be impressive, it's also unreliable. A couple of you may have seen a post of mine that I've reused on a number of occasions. The winter before last, or the one before that, we had a 10-day period where our 29 gigawatts of onshore and offshore wind averaged producing about a gigawatt. Now, thank Christ, we had lots of interconnectors and lots of gas-fired capacity, and even then coal-fired capacity to light up and keep running. But if you ever work out the sheer shortfall that storage would have had to have produced, it's just horrifying. It's just beyond the levels of sanity.
So there's a problem with storage. I mean, can't you simply build more batteries? Is that not feasible?
Not when you crunch the numbers. I mean, seriously, our biggest operational energy storage plant is a place called Dinorwig in Wales. There's a bigger one about to come on stream, but for the moment, Dinorwig can hold about 10.5 gigawatt hours. This particular period of low output effectively left a shortfall of around 10 gigawatts for 10 days. Pump storage hydro, which is between a factor of 10 and 100 cheaper than battery.
Yeah.
Per gigawatt hour storage. So who knows?
There's no way to replicate it then.
Well, I did do some number crunching. I think if I remember the numbers rightly, and I'd have to go and check them, battery would have cost something like our entire GDP for 3 to 4 years.
That is insurmountable in terms of storage, and of course,
you might think so, but apparently that's not dawned on our Department of Energy yet.
Well, the secret is, of course, that you could just use fossil fuels. They are fantastically cheap for storing energy.
They are. They are a lovely way of storing energy. Few slight downsides, of course.
Oh, of course. So renewables couldn't have solved this. Is there a solution? Is there Hinkley C perhaps downsized, simplified? Is that the kind of solution that you're looking at?
Right. Now I shall watch for Gabriel wincing, because this is something he's probably sick of seeing from me online. There's only one design at the moment that's up for production for which I feel genuine enthusiasm, and that's the BWRX that I mentioned earlier. We obviously need to build things with a radical simplification compared to what we're building at the moment. Now, yes, going to smaller reactors makes that easier. I think we've got major problems, frankly, hitting anything close to net zero without it. And I think we have, in the UK, we have a particular problem that if I were to just give you a challenge, which was our equivalent of your Secretary of State for Energy, and whoever the head of the Department of Energy might be in your own structures, for our equivalents, when do you think the last time we had a Secretary of State for Energy or a Chief Secretary of the Department of Energy, when do you think we last had one with a physical sciences or engineering background?
Not going to be happy. I would probably guess decades. Is that unfortunate?
It's a trick question. We've never had one.
Never.
Never. Now, what we have at the moment is a department that's obsessed with greenwashing, ticking the box. We've achieved this, we've achieved that. And they're heading down a line which I don't think they themselves understand, where essentially the plan is to massively overbuild renewables, particularly offshore wind, in the hope that something viable in the storage front will come along. And, well, if the shit hits the fan, we'll simply have to light up the gas-fired plants. The problem is, how do you keep the gas-fired plants going when they're offline 90% of the time and not making any money? So we're now in a situation where we're actually paying plant to stay connected to the grid and not run, and then having to pay some truly terrifying prices when it does run. Our energy prices are way higher than yours, largely because of these initiatives. But if I were to tell you that the average wholesale price of a megawatt hour on the British grid will sit for most of the year between £50 a megawatt hour and £100 a megawatt hour, and that we've had excursions during periods of low renewables output to well over £3,000 per megawatt hour to bring gas-fired plant online, how sustainable a situation would you think that is?
I mean, we have this famous saying
I know.
in nuclear, the Enronification of energy. Again,
yes, it's barking mad. I mean, it's what happens when people who have no understanding of the physical realities of energy supply and reliability make policy.
Let's get to Gabe's question.
Go on, Gabe.
Okay, yeah. How good is the rest of Europe in supplementing that problem if you've got a real shortfall with wind?
Well, the Germans run mostly off coal. The French obviously don't have a problem. They run nuclear. Places like the Dutch, the Belgians are much in the same place as ourselves. And most of Southern Europe is just chaotic. Sorry, that's a very British way of looking at it, but the Scandinavians seem to hang it fairly well together. But again, the Swedes and the Finns are both 50%-ish nuclear grids.
I mean, and we've seen this in prices where nuclear is a part of the baseload system. There is a dampening effect on how these gas prices swing, how energy prices swing.
Absolutely. I mean, some of this is our market arrangements. Again, let's not go there. If I can recommend someone to read to you, or you can find he's got his own website online. It's a chap called Dieter Helm, Helm. He's professor of energy economics at Oxford. And he is a voice of complete sanity in all of this mess. Our particular problem is we've now, through our various forms of renewables support, we've built in so much negation of the market process by guaranteed prices, subsidies, and so on. And these are all contracted for plant life or for significant periods. It's going to be awfully difficult to extract ourselves from this mess. So Helm is well worth reading. I'm a management consultant, mindset coming through, the economics. But it all goes a bit crazy.
I think that'll help our audience out. Well, I'll say thank you to everyone for all your contributions. This has been the Ecomodernist channel live. You can find us every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much. And Andy Dawson.
Dawson. Okay. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find us every Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can find us right here on YouTube at Ecomodernist 1 or the Ecomodernist channel live. You can find us on Facebook at the Ecomodernist Society of North America. Please support us on Patreon at the Ecomodernist channel. And you can find us online at esna.earth. That's esna.earth. We also rebroadcast to my personal x.com account. I'm Carl Alex Pauls. You can find us on my LinkedIn page and my personal Twitch at Soyaddle or soyaddle.tv. And remember, emissions first, peace and justice will follow.
Please subscribe to us on YouTube, Ecomodernist channel. Also to subscribe to us on Twitter and Facebook, Ecomodernist Society of North America.
And online at https://esna.earth.